Welcome to episode 11 of the Greenhorn podcast. We made it to episode 11 and we're way ahead of our schedule, which is nice. So it was scheduled to do one a week, but we've managed to do a couple this week, which is good. And
it's brilliant. Like, to get to double figures alone, I feel like was amazing. Like, we've done 10 we've recorded together, but then we did add that extra episode, that fitness one, which is kind of done okay. I was hoping it would do a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know if I'll release any of the other ones just off the back of that. I think, there's part of it people listening because they want to listen to us talking, I suppose, and having conversations about, our lives and what we're doing rather than the sort of fitnessy thing. But either way, we shall see. But yeah, I think we should be delighted we're at 11. And as Neil says, we are like ahead of schedule to a certain degree. It means that we're thinking about going ahead and making sure that we can schedule these things rather than doing them like the night before and then uploading it or whatever else. We're trying to, make it sustainable, I think, is a word I wouldn't use for fitness, but I would use for this because I want to keep it going.
Yeah, definitely. And if you are watching on YouTube and I keep looking up, my son, I'm home alone, as in I've got my 3 kids trying to record a podcast, and one of my kids has a bit of a tickly cough. So it's always that moment when they're quite young and you're like, are they going to spew? Are you going to have to run upstairs and try and save them? Or is he going to come down, cover and spew?
It is one of those things when now you're kind of like, I've got all this stuff planned and I'd really like to be able to do it, but I can't control my kid on whether or not they're going to throw up on me, get sick, sleep, not sleep, throw a tantrum, go mad, and you're trying to make it for a train or you're trying to do something, like, who knows? But I think...
I've even turned my noise cancelling off.
So you can...
I need to listen out.
But this
leads us on to our topic of the week.
Well, it kind of does, but we'll start the same way, Neil. I was just about to say that it does lead into it quite nicely. But the first one is, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a bit of a wild week. Pretty busy. And yeah, like I think I said, or you'll hear in episode 10, we're just trying to find our feet in terms of routine, rhythm of this bakery that my wife's started up, and coffee shop, and like all that entails. So
how's that going? You had people going out the door, didn't you?
Yeah, so this is completed week 2, and without going into kind of pound coins and figures and stuff, we may touch on that in another episode. We'll see what they think. But the queue's out the door. I mean, she sold, just to give you some figures of bakes, over 100 donuts yesterday. Wow. And she sells loads of different kind of bakes, so donuts is one of them, but selling out of lots of stuff, which is good and not so good. I mean, it creates hype, but then you want to try and supply that demand. Yeah,
because you want that first interaction with a new customer, right? You don't want them to turn up and go, "Oh, what do you mean you've sold out?" You're like, "Well, I sold out because I'm really busy. If you come a bit earlier next time." But I suppose it's the way you handle it. Like, I don't know, it could be good because it gives people a recognition. You're like, look, like we're sold out. We can only make so much, and we're a small business. Yeah. But no, it's amazing.
They've had returning customers already. I mean, there's this one woman that's come in 4 times this week, which is mad. This old lady that lives close by. They've got their coffee machine in, so that wasn't in for first week, but it's in for second week, which makes phenomenal coffee now. And yeah, it's just all a bit of a whirlwind. So we're still trying to find our feet in terms of routine of the kids, routine of Rebecca getting a break, me getting a break.
You'll get there. Yeah. And it's kind of a fun adventure, having your own business and doing your own thing and whatnot. So it's good. And I was just thinking of the top of my head, if and when we come up to Dunfermline, we should do a podcast episode in the cafe.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
But could you imagine having that? Wouldn't that be quite a fun thing to have? Is to have a podcast in the cafe?
Maybe not while there's customers, obviously. But
well, you could do, because we could sit in a corner, like away from everyone, so you're not hearing the conversations. But I don't know, maybe the ambient noise of the coffee shop would be all right, because I can't imagine people are running around shouting and swearing.
Yeah, we can see, but certainly, even if it's a backdrop.
Anything else in the rest of your week?
Anything else? Yeah, out with a couple of friends on Thursday night, which is good. A few beers. I try and do that at least once a week. I think that's pretty healthy. Maybe not the alcohol consumption, but the socialisation of that.
Oh yeah, what did you talk about?
Work, a lot of work. So
really?
It was work friends. So
right, okay.
Just being acquired and.
I try and avoid that. When you go out to work colleagues, it's like you can easily get wrapped into the whole let's just talk about work stuff. when I'm like, well, come on, let's talk about like, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Maybe you know them that well already.
We did go down that. So the guy I was with the longest, I'll call him Craig, 'cause his name's Craig. He's in his late 40s, CEO of the startup I was a part of and now sold. He's still part of the company that bought them. But yeah, we actually went into a topic that we discussed is like, what's your biggest fears? And I think that was probably triggered based on the thought process of that podcast we did.
Oh yeah, fun.
Which is quite interesting.
But it's been going well, the podcast, like the downloads and stuff. We're not hitting thousands or anything like that. But we're getting like a consistent over 30. We're getting a consistent over 30 per episode, which I feel pretty proud about. Like 30 people are tuning in to listen to the podcast, and that feels pretty solid. And we're approaching first to 500 downloads, which is fun. And considering we've had 11 episodes now,
I know
that's all right. I'm still enjoying it. Like I get excited about doing the podcast, and I hope you do too.
Yeah, this is Sunday. So how's your full week been? What's your highlight?
Highlight this week was getting the Creatorpreneur course filmed. That was a big one, like a big one for us. I'm still nervous about a few parts of the footage and how it's come along, and the sound in the venue was never going to be amazing, but the aesthetic of it was really good. So it's trying to kind of balance that, and I just hope it comes out to what it should do. We've got our new editor starting on Thursday, and he'll be tasked with editing that, so he'll have a little footage and be able to work with it and do what he needs to do. That was that done. We also launched the Part-Time YouTuber Academy. When I say we, I have a small amount to do with it in terms of I've got to host something and I've got to do some other bits and pieces, and I had to take pictures and videos and stuff for it. But the team have been working on that. The Part-Time YouTuber Academy team have been working on that. I think they're selling over like 300 spaces, maybe even more actually. I think the aim's definitely over 400. I think, and they probably will make it. So they've done really well with that. The whole process is just amazing to watch and sort of be party to, and it's a big driver for the business. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Then Laura's mum and dad, they're back from Kenya for good. So we're living with them now essentially, but that's really good because it's just, well, first of all, it's lovely to see them. Second of all, it's nice to have another pair of helping hands. Really, just kind of just being there, sure. And they love hanging out. Like they love hanging out with Olivia. So it's really nice to see them, have them here. And it also means that our house is kind of getting down the road a bit more in terms of the building process. We've got steel beams going in this coming Wednesday, which means it's supporting the walls and whatnot for the extension itself. That gets fitted in. So we just had another nice, lovely big bill to pay, which it's not very tasty, but you know, every week it seems to be at least £2,000, give or take. But we've got savings and we're kind of prepared for it all. So that's that's pretty much my week, to be honest.
Nice.
I think it's.
Have you got a busy week ahead? What's your week looking like?
Yeah, we do. We've got like 2 podcast episodes to film, which are pretty hardcore. We've got, like I say, that new editor I've got to help on board because he's going to be part of my team. We've got prep for a couple other bits. We've got a vlog to edit, meetings, standard sort of things. So yeah, it's pretty full on. And I've got beers with Johnny on Tuesday, which I'm looking forward to. One of my friends, Johnny Jacobs. Nice. And then we've got a lunch actually, with a couple of friends we haven't seen for a while, certainly since Olivia was born, at a restaurant called Ottolenghi. So he's got a famous Lebanese chef, I think, but he's got some cool books. He's got a book called Simple, so it's some simple meals that you can make, and they're really, really good and very popular. And he's got some cool restaurants around London, so we're going to go to one of them with some friends. Nice. And, last one, booked a holiday.
Is this your Canada trip? Not your Canada trip?
No. Done that. That's a Seattle one. We booked that already. That's ages away.
Oh.
We had some vouchers. Do you remember the whole COVID thing? It's knocking us out. During Christmas, we'd had some flights booked, £350, £350 to fly up to Dunfermline for Christmas. So they got cancelled, obviously, during the COVID thing, so we've been waiting to use them. So me and Laura have booked a short weekend away, sort of Friday to Monday, to the Amalfi Coast.
Nice.
So we're off to Italy, so that'll be fun.
Without Olivia or with Olivia? Or?
Without Olivia, just the 2 of us.
Wow.
I know. 4 nights away. One of us is dreading it, one of us is super excited.
I guess that comes on to our topic of the week, though.
Hashtag dad life. I suppose, what could we call this episode? Should we call it Dad Life or whatever else?
We could do a series. We could do a series of dad life.
Oh, we could go on forever, I think, with the journeys that we've had with various stories. But effectively, we were kind of like debating about what do we talk about this week. And I was quite keen to go into the sort of the dad thing again, because those episodes seem to be moderately popular. And, just we're young guys going through the process of trying to raise a family. Neil's been doing it longer than I have, and I'm still pretty new to it. But it was just some of the things that have popped up, some of the negatives, some of the positives, some of the stories that we could potentially tell and sort of convey and go over. So, Neil, do you want to kick off, or do you want me to go first?
I think interested. I mean, I think the listeners by now may know, but we create like a shared notes. And reading through Gordon's, it's a different angle to mine. So
right, is it?
I've obviously, it's so similar, but I mean, as Gordon mentioned, I've been a dad for 7 years, which is mad. Like my daughter just turned 7 officially last week. And I think that comes with, I don't know, as your child gets older, you're going to have a different set of worries, a different set of concerns and things that play on your head. And
play in your mind, maybe not on your head.
Yeah, and Gordon's coming from it from a new dad point of view, which is fine. But I'm definitely, I feel like I'm getting old.
I raised this one. I think I was just thinking about it more because I feel like the whole Ukraine conflict made me think more about just what the hell mums and dads are doing. Like I get it. Old people, elderly people, single people, young people, like it's still going to be a massive challenge for them. But I was kind of thinking about my situation and then transporting that into a Ukrainian family's position. Just like I can almost not comprehend it. Like suddenly there's tanks really outside my front door, there's shellings going off, like Olivia and Laura have to go to a bomb shelter somewhere. They have to take nappies and cleaning things and food for her. And you know what it's like trying to leave the house. You came to my wedding. You basically took a van down to the wedding just because you had all the kids' stuff, right? And they were in a different car. You were in the other car. Yeah. But just imagine that was during wartime and you're trying to survive. And then, I'm conscripted to the army because that's part of the process. Like if you're a young man that's able to fight, you have to go and bear arms. So you're leaving your wife and child down in a bunker with barely any food and any nappies or any help or any like medication or whatever else, and somewhere normal to sleep. Like how the hell do you get her to sleep? If she's not got a normal bed, a normal routine, how do you wash her? Like that's awful, right? And then your husband or you yourself, you're off fighting the Russians. You don't even know if you're going to come back. Yeah,
and then the wife doesn't know if you're going to come back, and
that's in 2000. That's 2022. That's 2022, not 1940, not 1912. But that got me thinking about this. I was just kind of thinking about the empathy, the understandings, the things that I've kind of struggled with, and just the general world. I think I was thinking about, to be honest. That's why I wanted to talk about it.
It is a horrific. You try and not tune in, but it's impossible not to, and it's impacting the whole world. Obviously, Ukraine's in a bit of a mess, to say the least, but even things like prices rising and potential of like Poland going to war, and there's just a crazy amount of stuff.
I mean, we've been sheltered from it quite a lot. The Middle East, places like Yemen, for example, have been under siege, and certain parts of like Syria and all those kind of places.
Israel and...
Yeah, all that. It's been horrific. So we've been in Europe pretty sheltered, I suppose. And now here we are. It's kind of it's not even just the Ukrainian conflict. It's even hit me home more now, becoming a dad. That there's families all across the world that are suffering this type of thing. And I was just kind of thinking about it. So that was my
nice. Yeah, I think it's the biggest bombshell when you have your first child is like you've got one dependent now.
Oh yeah,
and that changes a lot of stuff. You might have a wife or a girlfriend or a partner that's depending on you, but yeah, when you've got like this little baby that needs you to do everything, every single thing, there's a lot to take in, and it's even just from changing a nappy or putting food on the table to getting a mortgage for a house. So when you apply for a mortgage, they're going to ask you how many dependents have you got, and then that affects your affordability, and then that goes down a whole thing. So yeah, there's a lot to.
Oh, it's mad, isn't it? When a baby's born, you don't realise how useless we are as human beings for the best part of like 4 or 5 years of your life.
Yeah.
You know,
I know.
she's so useless that, and I'm sorry, Olivia, if you're listening to this when you're like 18, but you're so useless that when you lie down, you've now got a bald patch on the back of your head because you can't move anywhere apart from that. You know, and it's simple things like I didn't realize was they don't drink water for the best part of the first 6 months of their life. It's just baby milk or breast milk. That's it. And but then equally, I also found it incredible that you've got a dependent, but she's very able and capable of finding the breast to be able to feed from, right? Because they
telling you she's hungry.
Yeah, and then like hands to the mouth thing and all that kind of stuff. Like that's bonkers as well. So you consider how useless they are as things. They're also incredibly capable of other stuff, you know, which is pretty phenomenal. But did you feel particularly like, how did your attitude to things change? You know, how did your attitude change to friends? How did your attitude change to other parents? How did your attitude change to work when you've now got this dependent? Because you said, you know, affordability stuff and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I'll probably unpack the friends question first. And I felt, and this is going way back, when I first became a dad, you almost drift apart from your friends that I've got. I've not even got a girlfriend yet, and they're out every Friday, Saturday night partying, and they kind of, I don't know, go on the back burner a little bit because you've now got a wife and a child or a partner to look after, and you make new friends, and it kind of leads on to that kind of other parent chat. It's hard being a young dad, so I was 23, 24, mentioned it a few times in the podcast, and by far when you're taking the child to baby groups and stuff like that, you're definitely one of the youngest in the room. I don't know how you felt, Gordon. Did you take Olivia to classes and stuff? Well, we
were in COVID.
Oh, of course.
So, but then most of the dads that I meet, so the mums are a little bit older than Laura, so maybe they're 32, 33, but the dads are all, you know, 33, 34, 35 these days. So I'm pretty much the same kind of age as them. You know, you were very different in the sense you had a kid when you were like 24, right? That's quite different these days. But I'm just kind of interested, like, so did work become a different sort of priority or a different thought in your head? Because, you know, if I reflect back, or I reflect now on how I approach work, before it was kind of, I was just doing it because, first of all, it was definitely just because it was fun, because I was interested in it. Didn't really matter to me. There wasn't something I worried about too much. Maybe a little bit. I had like a mortgage to pay and whatnot, but I always felt confident I could do that. It was never really something I'd worried about. But now I look at work as something that's kind of very different, because Olivia can't survive unless I earn enough money. Or I kind of feel like that. I shouldn't. That's not the case, and that's not going to happen. But you know what I mean? It's like I need to step up. I need to take this seriously, or, you know, I don't know, have a different type of attitude towards work where my words mean things and my attitude means things and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I think probably looking back perhaps, but now, I mean, I just look at like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is, I don't know, I lose my job, can't pay my mortgage for a couple of months. I get food stamps or benefits from the government that provides meals for the table. So like, if you go through all that, I've got parents, I've got you, like I've got a good support network, I've got my in-laws. So if I don't know, work for me, maybe I did at the very start, I think, I need to kind of change my attitude towards it. But I think now it's kind of ingrained in me that I don't need to, maybe not ingrained, but I don't need to stress over that part, because if I lose my job, I'll get a new job in a few months. I'll be fine. Touch wood.
Well, that's nice. But then maybe even like earning capabilities. So I thought about work slightly differently in that, you know, I do have an aspiration to be able to privately educate my children. And, you know, maybe that's a bit ambitious, or maybe people are like, nah, you can just go to public school or whatever else. But private education is better. Like pretty much everything you can buy that's private healthcare, private education, private lessons, that's probably education. But those two types of attitudes, you get better care pretty much across the board, and you get better teaching across the board because the classes are much smaller, you get much more attention, they're just better equipped, all these kind of things. So I would like to be able to do that, and that comes with a certain job, right? It comes with a certain income. Yeah. So I suppose I felt also pressure from that, saying that, what if Olivia wants a fancy toy or certain outfits or, yeah, and it sounds ridiculous, but you want to be able to give them that, right? You don't want them to have, you have to say, no, sorry, Daddy can't afford it.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be limits.
There's going to be limits, yes, of course there is.
And there's whether it's the right time to buy that thing or not. But
did for you having a dependent change priorities within your life? Because you kind of talked about the idea of friends, right? So they clearly had a very different priority to you. They were like, yeah, chasing tail, doing what they wanted to do, drinking, not really caring about what they were doing. But do you feel like that was also just because you had a different priority, they had a different priority, you don't kind of align in that way? But was there anything else that changed in terms of priorities?
yeah, like I kind of went back to it, and you mentioned it in your list where you almost not become a recluse, but maybe go home a bit earlier, or want to not have that hangover, so maybe choose to have 1 or 2 beers instead of 5 or 6. And it brings me back to, I think we were out a few years ago now in Edinburgh, and I was like, I'm getting the train home early. And you had no, you had no sympathy or empathy towards that because you didn't have that.
No, because I still saw you as my little brother, right?
Yeah.
I still saw you as you were still very young, so I was like, the hell are you going home for?
With a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
That's probably going to wake me up half through the night, and a hangover, even just like 4 or 5 beers, not even a hangover, you still feel a bit minging in the morning, haven't slept right. It can derail your whole day, and it's just not worth it.
But I find it now a mixture of both, where it's a case of I'm now missing out on something. So I'm missing out on hanging out with Olivia or being engaged as I might normally be or whatever else. But I also feel like that's bad because she wants to see me and say hello and hug me and, play with me and do whatever else. But I'm incapable because I drank too much.
You got to be responsible.
But then there's also there's also the balance, right? Where I think there is the balance of being able to do those things, but choose them more, again, that priority thing, choose them more wisely. Like, that, okay, you've made a conscious decision where you're like, it's a bit like the Christmas party, I think. When you see like mums and dads out at the Christmas party, they're absolutely sloshed.
Yeah.
Because that's their one tick of the year where they go, hey, I'm going to go and get out and get absolutely up. Right?
Yeah.
And so I imagine like that's what you probably do now, is where you probably prioritize certain times where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to be a bit of a slob and be hungover because I'm going to have a good time with my brother. We're going to go out, we'll have dinner, we'll have a few bottles of wine. Like that, but I suppose you weren't looking after kids then. When you came down from New Year, we had quite a lot of, like 3 or 4 bottles of wine between 3 of us, plus beers and whatever else.
Yeah.
So I suppose you just become more kind of choosy about how you do it, really. I think that's certainly what I've experienced so far.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting in now. The boys are 3.5 out of 7. They're sleeping through pretty well, and they're pretty, I don't know if you're lying on the sofa ill or hungover, they're pretty self-sufficient. They want you, they're a bit easier than a newborn. So those, I think, nights out that I mentioned, and I try and go out once a week with friends over a beer or curry or something. And sometimes it may involve 5, 6, 7, 8 beers, and I'll manage it. I'll take it on the head. And
just for the record, by the way, for the podcast, Neil doesn't cycle home when he's had 8 to 10 beers in him. Okay. Apparently the law in Scotland says you're not allowed to cycle home. Is that right, Neil? If you're intoxicated?
No, not even. It's the same as driving.
Oh, interesting. So interesting. So you definitely don't cycle home if you've had 8 to 10 beers.
Yeah, definitely not.
Definitely not. Excellent, Neil.
What's a 6?
Is that the bicycle drink limit? Is it?
The e-bike drink limit. It drives itself. Self-driving.
Yeah, exactly. See, if it's self-driving, you're technically not driving the vehicle, are you?
Yeah. Please stop me.
He's on to something. Do you did you have a difference in terms of like prioritizing health, not just friendships but other relationships? How did you balance the priority from exercising, like you might go to the gym regularly, or even like being able to go out with Rebecca on a regular basis and maintaining that relationship? Like what was happening then?
Yeah, so I think the first, I want to say a year or 2 when I was born, my first one, no exercise, that kind of just went out the window. And you become a bit, I don't know, maybe to use it as an excuse, but you're also very tired. It's probably not great. You want to spend more time with her. Again, is it going back to an excuse? But yeah, exercise for me just went out the window. I just didn't enjoy it. I felt like I was being a bit selfish, especially with a new child. And even when the boys came along, when you've got a newborn, I think, although you're told to get time on your own and stuff, I think exercise can make you feel tired, can make you feel a bit more stressed. I just think there's a place and time for it. So if you're a new dad or becoming a dad, I'd probably recommend, I don't know, first 3 to 6 months, not doing anything. Just survive.
Just be fat and happy.
Yeah, dad bod. You can bring your body back, but you got to just survive those 6 months. And then that comes, if you don't exercise, if you're not out running or going to the gym 5 days a week, then could that hour be spent with your wife? Could that hour be spent with friends, which might have a better impact on you? And what about you? How are you struggling? Are you struggling with the gym?
Yeah, I still struggle with the gym. There's kind of a combination going on there. Is the fact that it's like a time stuff. So when I was, you're right, Neil.
Yeah,
so, if anyone's listening to the podcast, Neil's just listening out for his kid to see if he's thrown up everywhere. But I bet after he's finished this podcast, it's just going to be a puddle of it, and they're going to be jumping up and down in it, like when you go upstairs.
We'll see.
Yeah, difficult. It's the prioritizing health things. Kind of, it annoys me at the same time as I'm just kind of accepting of it to a certain degree. You know, there's that thing we talked about in previous episodes where I was at a certain pinnacle, or what I thought as a pinnacle of physique development, if you want to call it that, which just seems ridiculous saying that from a 34-year-old married man of one child. But I was at that, and then now I'm so far away from that. It's like, well, what's the point, part of thing. But then also, exactly like you say, certainly over the past few months, my weekend, like through the week, I'm in early, so I'm in at 8:30, 9 at work. And it's an hour commute, so I'm leaving house at 7:30, and I'm not home till about 7ish PM at night time. So I don't know where I'd fit it in. If I want to sleep, which is I do want to sleep, then I don't want to get up at 5 AM because I'd rather have an extra hour in bed rather than doing bicep curls. And at weekends, I want to relieve Laura of her hardcore week, right? So even if it's only me taking her for an hour in the morning, that means it'll push 8, 9 o'clock. Maybe it'll get to 10 o'clock. Then it's kind of a case of like getting Olivia organized for like breakfast time, nap times. And I'm just not in that kind of rhythm where I'm like, I'll go to the gym. Because it'll turn 10 o'clock, and then by the time it's 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime, whatever else. So and other stuff changes, like when you're becoming a dad, and the dad thoughts was maybe the title of this, but I don't know yet. But it's kind of the relationship aspect as well. Like, how does that change between the two of you? I found it's become kind of much more systemized and regimented and scheduled. It's a lot less passive and what's the word when you do something off the cuff and you just go for it?
I know what you mean.
Spontaneous.
Spontaneous, yeah.
It's a lot less spontaneous because normally you'd just be like,
go out for a meal.
Yeah, do you want to go shopping today? Do you want to go out? Do you want to come up to London for a Nando's? And now that doesn't happen.
It's a massive. People just don't, I guess, appreciate that when they've got it. And like Rebecca and I, from a personal point of view, we try most weeks. Some weeks we don't do it. Some weeks we do. Every Sunday night we'll sit down and plan like what's our meals for the week, our evening meals, because feeding five people takes a lot. But then we during that chat we schedule in like, right, are we going to have a date night, or maybe we're going to try and get babysitters and go out for a meal. So like sometimes a date night is scheduled like 7 days in advance. Before kids,
sexy.
You do it.
Oh, can't wait 7 days. I'm going to get myself a fish supper.
Countdown, 6 sleeps.
Exactly.
But that's reality. Like you've got to make time, and you've got to be both on the same page because.
But you got to plan it, right? That's the difference,
you got to plan
right?
it. Yeah,
and that's just not with how your relationship usually starts. Is the only planning you usually have is you're texting each other, and then you're like, oh, let's meet up for a date on this day, or whatever else. And I suppose it kind of goes back to that. But equally, you also, and I imagine you also go on a date together and you just start talking about the kids.
Yeah, I think we definitely did, but not anymore. We're better at that now. Phone stay in the car.
There's one rule: we don't talk about kids. Right. That's I suppose I do say it to Laura, actually. I'm like, come on, let's not talk about Olivia. Let's not talk about what she's up to, or routine. Like, we can do that any other time. This is just for us to have a chat about what we're up to and what we want to do.
Life.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then you also, I found that since we go out for dinners, we now, sometimes we might stay out till like midnight or something. Now we're like, oh, it's just gone 9 o'clock. I wouldn't mind getting to bed.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like everyone's got and even like when you go for long weekends away, and you're like, if I have 2 late nights, I'm going to be minging when I get back on Sunday or Monday.
And you definitely get your comfies on before anything else.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's something. What was I going to mention?
What were you going to mention, Neil? People can still hear you when you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
And see
it's
me.
A podcast.
It's going.
Yeah, from that perspective, I think you just, as we say, you're prioritizing the things that matter at that time. Certainly earlier on in the time, you're having a child, having a young baby, you're doing everything to make sure that you can satisfy what's going on in front of you, rather than thinking about, because it's almost like, I don't know if this is the right thing, but you kind of lose a sense of self a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Where you were very much individual to a certain degree, so you were about individual pursuits, and you were about individual things and what made me, what pleasured me to a certain degree. And then you get a girlfriend or you get a partner, and you start to sort of think more outside of that. And you start to think about, well, what's important to them and what's important for them, and how do I help make them happy?
Yeah.
But then you've got this other thing that's even bigger that you have to then tend to and do everything for, with nothing really getting back for quite a while. And yeah, I think you lose that kind of individual doing things for yourself, certainly for a while. And I'm okay with that. But it will be nice when we get it back, and I think you get that a little bit more now because of the fact that the boys can get some toast if they want to, or they can get a glass of water.
Yeah, but I've just that light bulb moment, thoughts come back. You mentioned like when you go out and you don't want to talk about kids. I mean, as your kids grow up, and like our house is just, the noise level is ridiculous. You've got 3 kids running around like crazy, trying to have any kind of conversation, whether it's, what we're having for dinner tonight, to life choices, to anything like that, is hard and almost impossible. So you find when you do go out for a meal, when you've got older kids, or not older, but like a 3-year-old to 7-year-old, then like the conversation flows really well and really easily, and the kids just don't get mentioned because there's just so much to update, and it's good. That's
a good point at which I can introduce a story about Neil that I found really quite funny. So I took Neil to Dubai. I think we talked about this for his 30th. And we're sat in the hotel room, and I think we just got back from something, or some shopping, or we went away to somewhere. Anyway, we're just sat in the room together, and I was like, Neil, do you fancy going and doing something? He was like, no, actually, I'd just like to sit here quietly. And he just sat there on his phone, just quietly, just kind of just chilling out. And I was like, this man's in his element in a hotel room in Dubai, where no one's running around screaming, going, Dad. Yeah. That's it. You're just in your element.
It's good.
Yeah.
Brings back
memories.
Reminiscing now.
One of the big ones that I found is, again, going back to that type of individualized approach to life, where you're just you had to put your car keys in your pocket, you had to put your wallet in your back pocket, take your phone with you, and that was it, right? You just went out the door and you could survive for the whole day. Now you're taking a small inventory. You've got,
quite literally,
you've got like a tank of a pram. I've got it actually sat next to us, so you can see if you're on YouTube. There's a pram right next to us, right? So you've literally got a massive pram to push around. You have to take a bag full of stuff that includes maybe 1 or 2 changes of clothes, nappies, baby wipes, potential bottles, like changing mats, toys for them to play with. Make sure they've got enough so they're warm enough. Like I couldn't believe the amount of stuff you have to take.
And then, like, think about the twin dads. Put my hand up. Times 2. It's mad. Like, 2. But not quite 2 change of bags, but 2 of everything.
But then I find when you go out with it, you don't realize how inaccessible most places are.
The world, yeah. Yeah.
Like, as soon as you start pushing a pram around, you now encounter things like, are there lifts at this station? Especially in London, because some tube stations don't have lifts. So you're like, shit, I've got to go on the escalator, but I'm not allowed to go on the escalator. Someone's going to tell me off. I'm like, but I'm not going to get the tube back to the other station that's got the escalator.
Like, why can't you take a buggy on an escalator?
Well, it's just unrecommended because it's quite dangerous.
It's strapped in.
Well, the baby's strapped in, but if you let go of it, it's going down the escalator, Neil.
Yeah, but you can also take it on stairs. Anyway, I don't agree with no escalator babies.
Right. Neil also doesn't take children on escalators for recommendation purposes, just in case anyone's listening. But yeah, the whole thing of like that, and you go to a certain shop and you're like, oh, have they got baby changing facilities? No. Well, why the hell did I buy this coffee in here? Because I was being nice. Or you go to a pub and there's like 4 steps up to get into it, or the door's not wide enough, or there's a queue, or baby's screaming, or whatever else. But I just found that, the stuff that you have to take with you is unreal. And the time it takes as well. Whereas before, you're just kind of like, you got your headphones in, you're just kind of, listening to Shania Twain, just do. You
can run to the train, but now, no chance of running.
Yeah, no chance of running, Neil. Not a chance. And then it's also for like Laura, she has to think about, how self-conscious am I breastfeeding in public? Where do I do it? How do I do it? Is there space to do it? Are there people watching?
Anyone going to judge me? And
yeah, like all that stuff. It's mad, isn't it?
It is. One thing that I wrote down, and this is a bit of it's turned into a random chat of dad chat, but that first sleepover in someone else's house. So this is for the people with older kids out there. Ilo's maybe 4 or 5. But it's a terrifying thought if you think that your child is going to another parent's house and maybe it's a school friend, so you may not know their mum and dad that well. Maybe it's maybe it's parents you're not really aware of, you're not really sure who they are, but they're going to that house because they want to have a sleepover. And things that are going through your head are just the worst. But then in reality, it's probably going to be okay. In reality, they're probably nice parents. But you've got that to look forward to.
But you're lucky in the UK. Realistically, the worst things they're going to hear is some swear words or something, or a TV program that you probably don't want them to watch. But I mean, there's not a huge amount on TV that can harm a child necessarily.
Yeah.
Most people, I would think, don't just have knives sat on the table and scissors and all that kind of stuff, right? But just imagine this: we stayed with a couple in Tennessee, yeah, in America, and she was a British woman, British man, and they had to make sure that their children understood what guns look like and not to touch them. So just imagine that. And they're not locked away. Like, these guns are just, in the side drawers or whatever else, loaded.
Yeah.
So I feel quite lucky in this, but I see what you mean. Like the first sort of sleepover, you wonder what they're up to, but I think you can give the benefit of the doubt most of the time. If their kid's coming over to your house and they don't look dishevelled and don't run around just saying the F-bomb, then I think you'll be all right. I think they'll probably survive.
No, I know what you mean, but you start looking at the area they live in, the type of car they drive, and you're like, is that going to be okay? But yeah, and I mean, you say in 2022 in UK, I mean, you're seeing Ukraine now falling to pieces. You don't know what the world's.
You hope not, Neil. You just got. There's even if something like that does happen, there's no control that we have. So, what can you do?
True. And another kind of topic I had was like the first holiday abroad. And you'll have that when you take Olivia to Canada.
We did a bit of Seattle, America.
Seattle.
We did do one though when we did a little getaway, just the two of us. I could definitely give you some funny stories from that.
Yeah, so it's just A, everything you need to pack. B, what the travel's like, what they're going to be like on the road or on the train or the plane. And there's just so much to worry about and stress about, especially when it's their first time. You're like, yeah, what's going on through your head? So anyway, how was your first trip away with Olivia?
Oh, right. Well, this was interesting. So we went to Cheltenham, which is near Cotswolds. So nice area of just outside London. It's really, really kind of nice.
Train.
We drove. So it was really nice. And we kind of have these grand plans of, Olivia to bed, put her in the pram, and then take her to the restaurant with us. The first restaurant we went to, Laura had looked it up and it said it looked really good, and it was like kind of Sri Lankan street foody food, and it just looked really cool. And this was maybe I think this was like a Friday night or something, or a Saturday night. Anyway, we rock up to it and we're like, oh, it's quite loud music in there. And it's like full of like late 20s, early 30s, having like a bit of a party basically. And we've got the baby in the pram and we're like, I'm not sure we can go in here. And then it was like, even if we took the pram, we couldn't probably squeeze past everyone to get to our seat, and it was just too loud. And it was such a lovely thought of Laura to see if we could have like a nice meal somewhere. But at the same time, you couldn't have just worked that out, because it was awful. So then we ended up traipsing through the streets looking for like somewhere to eat, and it was quite late and we're getting hungry and baby's not asleep, and oh my word. But we stumble across this restaurant and we get into the restaurant and we're like, oh, this will be all right. So we sit down. Well, the maitre d', she really wants to talk to the baby. The baby's supposed to be asleep. So she's like, oh, she's so cute. Oh, she looks so cute. Just staring at her, talking to her.
Don't look at her eyes.
Yeah. And you're just like, please leave her alone. She's supposed to be asleep. So then she wouldn't go to sleep. So then we just ended up like having her meal. One of us was holding Olivia. She's wide awake at 8 o'clock at night, eating dinner, and it just didn't work out very well. But we got through it. And then the next night we did manage to somehow do it. We took her out and she did fall asleep actually in the pram in the restaurant, which was quite nice. And we did eat a meal, so it was fine. So it was kind of a mixed bag really of just try and see what would happen, and it seemed to work okay. So. Yeah. Your first holiday, you went to Spain, didn't you? You won some voucher thing.
Lanzarote, yeah. We went to Lanzarote and we won $2,500. And you're probably thinking, why did you go to Lanzarote for $2,500? Long story short, Rebecca was pregnant. There's a finite window of time we had to go before the twins arrived. We wanted sun. January, Lanzarote was good in January. So yeah, took a trip out there, and Isla was 3, so again, 2.5, 3. Quite easy to manage, but just the amount of packing you've got to do. And just FYI for any dads or parents out there, generally if you're traveling with a kid, you get loads of things free. So like car seats, buggies, extra luggage, even down to London if you're flying to London. EasyJet, that you can throw in loads of stuff with a child. But yeah, I think any kind of funny moments when we're out there, I don't think so, but I've got a kind of funny story about the first kind of holiday, or not holiday, but trip away with Isla. So she was 4 months old, and I don't know if Isla was a difficult baby or if it was just my parenting, or too young, too naive, how hard things could be. Anyway, we took her away. Rebecca had a hen do, and long story short, Rebecca couldn't. This is going into too much detail. Anyway, I came along with Rebecca and Isla, and I stayed in a hotel beside the Hindu. So here's me in this random hotel, and the Hindu's in this log cabin somewhere. And it was just in case Isla needed Rebecca at any point in time, so Rebecca could come over and help. Anyway, 4 months away with Isla. She didn't really take to the bottle very well, hence why Rebecca needed to be on standby. And here's me at like 3 in the morning. Isla wakes up for a feed, and she refused to take a bottle.
Wow.
Point blank refused. And I couldn't get hold of Rebecca. She's probably fast asleep, maybe drinking, I can't remember. So for 3-4 hours, I was in this hotel room with a screaming baby with nothing like.
There's nothing more alone, is there, Neil?
I had bottles of milk. She wouldn't take it. She refused the bottle. Yeah, that was a lonely, dark time.
There's nothing more alone than that happening when you're just, because I don't think I've had that. I haven't had a night with Olivia on my own. Laura's always been like, she'd either sleep in another room or whatever else, so I could just bring her through if she needed to feed. Yeah. But yeah, I've not had that, and that's pretty terrifying. Like, hat tip to Laura and what she's capable of doing, and hat tip to Rebecca and what we're capable of doing. It's mental, isn't it?
And this was like in a hotel room that obviously Isla didn't know, and it was a hard night. But
I did. There's one I'll finish on, and maybe I'll be a bit more timid with what my notes say, to be honest. But have you ever stumbled across? It's kind of this weird. We're in this weird cultural shift, I find, where me and you grew up, where the internet was not Wi-Fi. It was download whatever, that noise, a dial-up internet thing that we had. So we still came from like, well, yeah, time had changed a lot, but there was still kind of some old school values in the sense that men went to work and women stayed at home and looked after babies. Not that happened in our household, like mum went to work, certainly when we were a bit older, but that still kind of carries on a little bit. There's still certainly an element of men will continue to go to work because women will stay at home and look after the children during their maternity leave and maybe go and continue the career from there. But I still find there's some stuff lagging behind in the sense that, there's more rights for men. There's paternity leave that's kicked in for certain things. There's more companies adopting longer paternity leave for men. There's more men staying at home as house husbands rather than going to work. They look after children. Their wives or their partners will go to work, that kind of thing. But I still find there's things like some changing facilities for babies will only be in the ladies.
Yeah.
And you're like,
mad.
If this was the other way around, it would be pandemonium going on the BBC or Channel 4 would make a documentary about it or whatever else. So with that, I kind of feel just a bit uncomfortable. I'm just like, do I go in? Like, what do you do in that situation? And what have you ever? I don't think I've gone in, but it kind of goes through your head. Where you're like, if I'm in a bad situation, like for example, by the way, Olivia's going through weaning stage at the moment, and weaning stage means they don't go to the bathroom as much. But when they do go to the bathroom, it is. I think I sent Neil the picture. Did I send you the picture?
Yeah. You did.
It is. It's pretty impressive what comes out of an 8-kilo baby. Let's put it that way. So imagine you're in that situation and you arrive to this destination and the only baby changing facilities in the ladies' changing rooms. You'd be like, well, I'm going in.
Yeah, you don't have a choice.
I'm like, ladies, cover up, do whatever you're doing, but I've got a baby, I'm coming in.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder some attitude aspects of.
It's a bit sad, certainly, and just taking it a step back a little bit when you mentioned like the olden days back in the day when generally the mother or the mum look after the child. I remember when Isla was first born and we were up in Skye, and Rebecca's Nana and Papa, they were maybe, I don't know, in their 80s. And I think it was maybe their first great-grandchild or one of their first great-grandchildren. And I took Isla away to change her nappy. And Papa Skye asked Rebecca, my wife, what's he doing? Because,
really?
Yeah, he was like, he couldn't believe I had taken Isla away to change her nappy.
Wow.
Because he always thought it should have been the mum.
But that's
so foreign to him.
That's quite interesting though, because that attitude, the interesting attitude about that is that wasn't necessarily just ingrained, perhaps, in him by other men. It wasn't like necessarily adopted by him by other men. Because Laura's granddad, I remember sat down speaking to him about it when his son David was born and the other children. He wasn't allowed in the birthing suite. So men were not allowed in the maternity birthing suite. Like they weren't allowed in the maternity hospital. Only women were allowed there. Like, could you? I couldn't imagine not being at the birth of my child. No way.
No way.
But back in the day, men weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, so sometimes I think these things just kind of come along as part of it, and to some extent, there is still that kicking around, right? When I think Laura gets really annoyed with people, certainly the older generation might say things like, "Oh, he's a really hands-on dad."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Nah, mate, he's just a dad. Like he's doing what he should be doing. Like, you don't need to say things like hands-on dad. It's like, you don't say hands-on mum."
Yeah, no, you're right. And even, and this was actually happened yesterday. We were at the beach with a couple of friends. I'm not going to name drop them, but one of my friends has got an older brother. He's in his 40s now, or maybe late 40s. And he was commenting on how hands-on my friend was.
Wow.
And I was just like, yeah, it's not that far away. It's not that long ago that they were like that.
I think Neil's just cut out a little bit.
And Gordon's frozen.
What I'm going to do is,
I don't know if they can see us on YouTube.
I'm going to just hang out.
Is he going to come back? Oh, Gordon got disconnected. So, folks, hope you enjoyed episode 11 on just, random dad chat. I hope you found it useful. Let me see if he's going to come back on. So Gordon's having technical issues. So yeah, episode 11, I think it was a good chat. We discussed random plethora of dad things. If you've got any feedback, comments, feel free to leave them on our Instagram. Website is greenhornpodcast.live or at greenhornpodcast. And thanks for watching. Goodbye.